house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
You know, the only thing more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV.
Hey everybody, it's Ian, back again for another episode of Native Film Talk. Today, we're just going to chat about stuff. Today, the topic is everything. We're going to talk about Trickster, mention a little bit of Yellowstone. We're going to talk about Wild Indian at the Sundance Festival. We're going to talk a little bit about Clubhouse, some of the recent happenings with the podcast. But also, we're really just going to talk about something that crazy happened recently. We got mentioned in Patrick is a Navajo's Native React video. If you don't know who Patrick is a Navajo is, he is a YouTuber, and he does like Natives React. He invites on different natives on. He has a co-host that I think is pretty standard now to his episodes, or to his videos rather. And they watch what's going viral in native TikTok land, and really just native TikTok, native YouTube, really just like native centered stuff of like what's trending, and then they just react to it. And it's stupid popular, and he has almost 100,000 subscribers, averages like 250,000 views per video, and yeah, he's just like a rising star in the YouTube era that we live in right now. And Native Film Talk got mentioned. He had a video that came out on Sunday that featured really Hollywood and movies with natives in it. And he had stuff in there like Predator, you know, and kind of made some smoke signals jokes, and meshed with like Fast and the Furious. That was my favorite one. But yeah, go check that video out. And at the very end of it, he had a segment called like Natives Doing Cool Stuff. And the podcast was featured in it. Native Film Talk was featured in it because of Finding Nemo. And the Navajo dub version of Finding Nemo being released. And I interviewed Natalie Benali, who plays Dory in the Navajo dub version of Finding Nemo. And it was freaking awesome. Me and my wife went berserk. We went nuts. So that was pretty awesome. Yeah, let's get right into it. I'm going to discuss YouTube. I'm going to discuss Finding Nemo, Star Wars, and then Trickster, Yellowstone, and Wild Indian. So let's get started with, first of all, Clubhouse. If you don't know what Clubhouse is, look out for Clubhouse. Clubhouse is the next big social media platform. I found future guests on Clubhouse. I'm super excited to see where Clubhouse goes. It's really just like if you could imagine, if you've ever been to a conference of any kind where there's like seminar rooms and rooms that have different Q&A panels and different things like these, I'm talking like a massive conference. That's basically what Clubhouse is. You pop into different rooms, there's different discussions going on. Some of them are Q&A, some of them are you're just sitting in the audience, and then at some point they'll ask if any of the listeners have any feedback. There is zero video, there is zero chat, there is zero text to this, which I think is the beauty of Clubhouse. It's all audio. It's all listening, it's all talking, it's a very like long form discussion, and it's very popular now. We have people that have got on like Elon Musk and go on and just talk about whatever, you know. It's crazy. There are anybody that wants to have a conversation about anything, you can do that on Clubhouse. The only problem, I call it a problem right now, is you have to be invited. You have to be invited by someone that's already on Clubhouse. It's like Fight Club, except you actually talk about Fight Club in this instance. You tell someone that's on Clubhouse, like, hey, can you use one of your invites to get me onto the platform? So if you know someone that's on Clubhouse, you're interested in getting on, do it. I'm going to try to launch a Native Representation Club in Clubhouse, so that way we can have discussions about Native representation, not just in film, but in art, in general media, the news, current events, really just culture related too, to talk about identity issues, and really anything having to do with Native representation, because right now there's no space for us in Clubhouse. We kind of have to make our own rooms, and we don't have any clubs that we belong to right now. And if this is all kind of, you don't really know what's going on, just look into Clubhouse. Highly recommend it. I'll move on. Wild Indian at Sundance. This was great. I did not get to see this, unfortunately. There were only 2 screenings available. This was the first year that Sundance had a virtual festival, and there were 2 opportunities to watch The Wild Indian, and I missed both of them. So I'm kicking myself. But it sounds like it was a great movie. It's starring Jesse Eisenberg, Michael Gray Eyes, and Chaske Spencer. Michael Gray Eyes, you know him from a bunch of his work. Most recently Blood Quantum. Choske Spencer, he was Sam Uli from Twilight. So he was one of the wolves, and he was also in Skins as Mogi's son. So this was directed by Lyle Mitchell Corbine Jr., who is indigenous. It was written and directed by him. He's a native guy, and this is basically just like two young kids growing up, and they are a part of an unspeakable act. And because of that action in their youth, and two native kids seeing how it affects them growing up, it follows them into their adulthood. So the two main characters, Tedo and Mokwa, in the 1980s are played by, not by Michael Gray Eyes and Choske, but two younger children, and then they evolve into the story into their adulthood and see how that affects them. It's currently rocking to 79% on Rotten Tomatoes with like 30 critic reviews right now. So safe to say it's being well received. I can't wait to talk about this one. It doesn't sound like a feel-good movie. It's not a comedy. It sounds like a very, very different kind of movie, but it's one of the first indigenous movies that is like being written and directed by native people. Really, it's like, I mean, I'm sure there's others, but like the most prominent one is Smoke Signals. Smoke Signals premiered at Sundance, I think 1996 actually. So it's been a long time since we've had it at this level. And somebody could throw out another movie where this has happened in between now and then, but the fact that I can't rattle them off right after another is a problem. But this is a progress. And it's got Jesse Eisenberg in it, you know? I mean, this gives it credibility immediately. People who are non-native film fans, they'll watch this movie just because Jesse Eisenberg is in it, and they'll get to see how great of an actor Michael Gray Eyes is, and they'll get to see how great of an actor Choske Spencer is. So this is exciting for that alone. And Jesse Eisenberg loved this movie. He in interviews that he's asked about his character, he kind of plays Michael Gray Eyes' adult boss in this movie. And yeah, he just has nothing but great things to say about Michael Gray Eyes. He has nothing but great things to say about the director. So this is great. This is exciting. I want to talk about Trickster last. You know what? Screw it. Fuck it. Let's talk about Trickster. So first off, what a shame. Trickster was a TV show that came out in October of 2020 of last year on the Canadian Broadcast Channel, CBC, or is it Corporation? The CBC. It's their major network in Canada. So there is the Aboriginal People's Television Network. This was not aired on there. You look at Trickster, you would think like, oh, this has to be on APTN. But no, it's not. It's not on APTN. It was on the CBC. So it was like major distribution. So it was going to be seen by non-native people and native people alike. And full transparency, I found these episodes on YouTube. I didn't find them through the CW. And it finally made its way to the States on the CW in January. So just last month, it finally made it to regular programming on the CW. And there's only 6 episodes. Fantastic TV show. I made it through 3 episodes at this point, and it pains me to keep watching, knowing that it doesn't get another season. It's frustrating because people like Anna Lamb and Joel Ouellette, like they're great young native actors, and they have a bright future ahead of them. But because this show is canceled, they have to go find other work now. I really feel like they could have developed their characters so much to the point where they would have gotten so much more acting work, and hopefully these 6 episodes showcase enough of their talent that they do get more work. Because Anna Lam, she was in The Grizzlies, and I reviewed that a few episodes ago. She did great in that movie. And then Joel Ouellette, this is his acting debut. He was only 17 when the movie started, so he had just finished high school, or he was finishing up high school rather, as this show was going on. And so I was really excited to see him, grow into his own. And they're both indigenous. There's an indigenous cast throughout this entire show, and it's so frustrating because it's like, gosh, why can't we have nice things? Trickster is if you really want to see it, look it up on the CW. It's a shame the drama that's around Trickster. If you don't know anything about the drama surrounding the Trickster show, then here it is. So Michelle Latimer, she is a person who has claimed indigenous heritage for the last 20 years of her career, specifically stating that she was Algonquin, Métis and from the Kitaban group, and she never verified it. Like, so this is how I think it played out. She is white passing up to this point. So the fact that she's been claiming indigenous heritage up to this point is beside the issue, because she is white passing, and she has claimed that she's had indigenous roots, and she was indigenous up to this point. And whenever she talks about indigenous people, she says we in every interview. She's like, well, as an indigenous woman, as an indigenous person. It's always this we conversation. And we as indigenous people, like native people, we never like second guess it. We're just like, hey, everyone has a different experience. People have different skin color. People have different walks of life. You know, everyone has arrived to where they are as native people in so many different ways. There's 560 different native nations. We all end up where we are. We all look the way we are because of different factors that factor into our family history. So who are we to judge? But it came to find out there was an investigation launched in December of 2020 looking into her heritage, because they're like, hold on, this isn't lining up. She's claiming that she is from this group in Quebec, this Kitaban group from Quebec. But back in the day, there was confusion between French Canadians and this group. So let's look into this and see if Michelle Latimer falls into this. And sure enough, it turns out that she did not have any native lineage, according to this investigation that was launched. And as you know, the show came out in October, the investigation came out in December, and then the shitstorm erupted on Twitter, on social media. And it was not a good look, because it came out basically that she had just been claiming through family stories that she was native. Through her family stories, they said somewhere in our lineage there was a native person that was Kitaban, that was Métis Algonquin. And, well, one, the story kept changing about who the actual native relative was, like what nation they hailed from. And it was frustrating, because it's like, that's it? There was no verification? Like, as an indigenous person, you didn't think to go connect with your roots, to go connect with the community, to go connect with those people who are supposedly your people. You just go off of a family story, and you say like, oh yeah, I'm indigenous, and then you go from there. Yeah, I'm from that community, and that's it. So the Kitaban group, they deny all connection to her lineage, and that was kind of like the camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back. There were people backing out from the show, producers who were native. The writer of the books that the show is based on, Eden Robinson, she is native. She is Haisla. And she wrote a trilogy, The Son of the Trickster. Gosh, I'm going to not remember these off the top of my head. She has a trilogy of books, and it's Son of Trickster, Trickster Drift, and Return of the Trickster, which is coming out soon. So this show was going to go for a while, because she has 3 books written on this whole subject. And this woman's native. There's no doubt about it. Like, you hear this woman laugh, you're like, oh yeah, that's a native woman. But anyway, that's beside the point. She felt such guilt, Eden Robinson, when she found out that Michelle Latimer wasn't native. She quote unquote felt duped. And she had so much guilt. She's like, I can't collect money off of something that really fooled everybody. So all of my future royalties from the Trickster franchise, from the book franchise, that predates the show. She said, all my future royalties, I'm going to donate that to the Haisla language, basically like a revitalization fund. And Language Authority is the specific Haisla language authority. And it's like, she didn't need to do that. But as a native person, and this is going to be dangerous territory. So I am Navajo from the Navajo Res, born and raised. So this is my experience. My skin color is brown, but I don't look native. But I have some native features that resemble, you know, the people like Navajo people. But as a whole, like I just look like a brown person. So my experience is different than someone who, there are people like Michelle Latimer that do have light skin, that do get discriminated against by their own people for their skin color. So this is a sensitive subject for people, because you don't want to go and claim like, oh, she's not native because of how she looks. It's like, you can't do that. You can't do that. There are plenty of people who come from native communities and from indigenous communities that are connected to their community, that are starving to be reintroduced back into their community, to be accepted by their people, and do face discrimination because of where they come from. Or because maybe they come from off the res, or they lost contact with their family. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about people like Michelle Latimer that hear something, don't verify it, and they go and take opportunity from indigenous people. That's what this is about. Elizabeth Warren, Eyes Cody, Michelle Latimer. These are examples of people who claim indigenous heritage without doing any verification whatsoever, because they see an opportunity to capitalize on a market. And that's unpopular opinion to say, because this issue shows the divisiveness of how blood quantum and how colonialization has affected native tribes differently. You go on Twitter and you look at Pretendians, hashtag Pretendians, you look up the trickster controversy, there is such a disparity of opinion. When I first saw this, I was angry. I recorded an episode the day that I found out about it, and it was not good to listen to. It didn't age well. I listen to it now and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I didn't push that out. I was angry. It was F this, F that, F bomb this, I'm so freaking pissed. What kind of, where does she get off to do that? But that's me as a res kid, seeing someone that like, you can just check a box and like claim native heritage and that's it. And there's no one fact checking you. No one says like, hey, are these really indigenous stories? Is this really from an indigenous perspective? For the last 20 years, she's been in the film industry claiming indigenous heritage and has been taking opportunities from actual people who are indigenous and been telling stories on behalf of indigenous people. And to her credit, she has given opportunity to indigenous actors and indigenous producers. Because of her platform, she has done that. But by claiming that you are an indigenous person, people will go to her and have her be the authority. If you are native and you are listening to this, you know that you're the representative whenever you get asked a question. Just because you're indigenous, you know that. It's unfair. It's grossly unfair. But it happens more often than we like to acknowledge. They'll ask you a question like, do you still live in teepees? And you have to sit there and be like, no, we don't. And have that sit with you of like, I'm Navajo, I don't live in a teepee. Why do they think I live in a teepee? Where did that come from? They ask you questions like, so Ian, why is there so much poverty on the res? Why is there no, well, I heard something today that, a third of the Navajo Nation doesn't have running water. Why is that? How come you guys all live in trailers? How come you guys have that accent that sounds like that? Why is alcoholism such a problem on the reservation? The reservation, they're just talking ambiguously about all native people. And you sit there and you have to like sit there with that thought, and you're just like, whatever answer I give is probably going to be the only native person they ask. And you're just like, geez. Say something in Indian. Say something native, Ian. Oh, you're Navajo? Say something in Navajo. Oh, really? Just like that? What do you want me to say? It's complicated, and I'm so passionate about this because my perspective, I have three things that this bothers me, and I'll try to blaze through this. 3 reasons why this bothered me. 1, because I'm a res kid. 2, because I'm a college graduate from Ivy League University. And 3, because I have a podcast talking about native representation in film and television. 1, as a res kid, this is bullshit. Just straight up. Because, and there's multiple reasons for this. I grew up playing sports. I grew up playing basketball and baseball, and I grew up playing in all Indian tournaments throughout my life. There's like regular tournaments, and then there's like tournaments where there are only natives. And you can go travel to these all over the country to different reservations and play in these. When you go play in those tournaments, there is so much vetting that goes on. So much by our own community, that it gets to the level of discrimination and colonialization on display. It gets to the point where If a kid is too good, that's the only time it's ever an issue. If a kid is too good or is too tall or looks too big or looks too strong and it seems like there's an advantage that they have that anybody else doesn't have, they start calling foul. They start saying, hey, where's that kid from? Let me see that kid's birth certificate. Let me see that. Where's that kid enrolled? How come that kid's that kid's light skinned? He doesn't look native. She doesn't look native. What community are they from? I didn't know you could just bring anybody from there. How come? How did you find that person? They're not native. I'd never seen them before. Why is it we do that with sports? And there is zero verification in academia, in politics, in film and television. I'm not saying we should do that because it's gross. It is gross. I've been on the receiving end of that. Like having a parent tell me, he doesn't look native. Why is he playing? He looks too old. Why is he playing? When really it's like, hey, he's too good and I don't want him here. Or he doesn't fit the mold of what I think native should look like. And you grow up with that complex of like, what does a native look like? How do I really not look Navajo? And you stare in the mirror and you wonder, what's wrong with me? How come I don't look native? And then you have your friends who are maybe lighter skinned or darker skinned or really good athletes, and they get the same questions. You know, I have a friend whose mom was black and he was Navajo. He's fucking fast. Great athlete. He got so much crap growing up at these tournaments. And that person has to go through that and face that throughout his entire life. But you know what? That's why it bothers me that someone can just hear a family story and be like, yeah, my great-grandma was a Cherokee, whatever, or my great-grandma was native, and you just run with that. Yeah, sounds good. I'm native too. So it bothers me also for being a res kid, because as a native person, for someone to just check the box, it's not just a DNA test. Devery Jacobs, who's a great actor, by the way, upcoming in Reservation Dogs. She was in Rhymes for Young Ghouls and Jeff Barnaby's film. She was also in Blood Quantum. But she's a great actor. And she had a great post, and I encourage you to go look it up, just about this whole mess. Because she has indigenous actors and friends who were affected by this show. And she had the wool pulled over her eyes too. And it's like, it sucks. But she said, like, being native is more than just a piece of paper. It's more than just the results on a 23andMe. It's just more than a percentage on a piece of paper. You don't just can look at that and be like, Ian, and I hear this crap all the time. Ian, I just got my 23andMe results. I'm 3% native. I'm 4% native. What can I do to get enrolled? Can I get enrolled somewhere? Is there any casino money in that? Can I get benefits? So I get free healthcare? Or I get free college? My kids get free college? Just like, oh my gosh, man. Are you freaking kidding me? But you know what the difference is between being native and claiming you're native? In 2020, that was one of the worst years for my people, for indigenous country, for Indian country, because of COVID-19. COVID-19 disproportionately affected communities of color and people that come from lower socioeconomic status, like classes and communities, because they have higher population densities per home. And on my res, there was a third of the res that doesn't have access to running water. So when you're talking about social distancing, it's difficult when you have 8, 9, 10 people living in a house. And when you're talking about washing your hands constantly, because that's how you stop the spread. When you have a third of your community that doesn't have running water, you're going to be disproportionately affected by COVID-19. On top of your community has higher rates of comorbidities than the rest of the country. You have higher rates of diabetes, high blood pressure. Mental health is at a critical state. You have all of these things. This is a perfect storm for your community to get ravaged by COVID-19. And you have to watch those numbers every single day and think, how many of those are native people? How many of those are native speakers? How many of those are the last of, how many of those stories died with that person that we just lost? How many of those like words that person had that they carried on through their lineage that are just gone? And you have to like carry that around and, you know, watch people be anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers, and you're just like, where do I lie in this? It's just like, gosh, like this is such a struggle to have to be native in 2020, to think about how your community, to worry about your parents. My family's still all on the res, and I have to like worry every single time they call and hope it's not about a family member. That's what it means to be native. And that's not essentializing an experience. I'm not saying you have to have death in your family to be Native. I'm just saying more often than not, that's what it means to be Native. You mourn for your community. You mourn for your people because you have a deep appreciation for what they carry. You have a deep respect for what they bring. Despite the fact that, and this is my point number 2, being a person who went to an Ivy League college, despite the fact that you go back, you're from that community, you're born and raised from those towns, and you go back thinking like, oh, they're going to welcome me with open arms. They're going to be happy that I came back. And 4 years prior, when they sent you off and they said, go climb that ladder, go get an education, you come back and help our people. In 4 years, you come back ready to do that, and they say, oh, you think you're better than us now? That's what it is to be Native. To have to face that, to want to help your people despite all of that crap that gets thrown at you. All of this identity crisis that's ever evolving. That's what gets people to say, you know what? Fuck my people. I'm going to go live in the city. They don't need this. I don't need this. And then years later, you're just like, gosh, all that lost time. I should have just let that go. I should have just let that message go. I should have just let those words go by. I should have just went back and helped them and created opportunity where there wasn't any. That's what it means to be Native. And when I went to an Ivy League college, there were quote-unquote people we called box checkers. And this is a controversial thing, and I'm sure and this happens across the country, not just at my college I went to, where people will check the box Native American because of the same thing that Elizabeth Warren and Michelle Latimer and Eyes Cody, they all had, is somewhere in my lineage, someone said that they were Native. And I just ran with it. So I checked the box because I know, in this case, it benefits me to be Native. It benefits me to check the box. And I will never name names, ever. And I will never talk about these people publicly, even privately. I just have these stories in my head. And that's where they'll stay. But I have heard directly from people that I matriculated with year after year after year. Eventually, you just get to know some of these people. You're like, cool, where are you from? Where's your community from? Where are you enrolled? What, you're not enrolled? Where's your family originally from? I don't know. You don't know? What do you mean you don't know? You know what? Do you have any native language speakers? Like, you ever go back to the res? And then you realize it's just a story for these people. And they just checked the box and they got in. Zero verification. How is it that there's a sport that we're playing, a sport, when the smallest percentage of us will actually benefit from it, in the sense that it will take us to get a college education, or we will go and play professionally either here in the States or somewhere overseas. We put more scrutiny into that than something that will actually benefit people's lives and communities in the future, and we give zero scrutiny to that. College admissions. I mean, this is a whole other podcast topic in itself. But last, as a person who is running a podcast about Native representation, this blows, because people looked at her for the past 20 years as like, hey, there's representation. We check the box. She meets the quota. We have a Native person here, so we don't have to keep looking. And she might have had the greatest intentions in mind, but the fact is, this is a kick to the shins for Native people, because it's like, really? Even if she did a great job of accurately representing people and standing up for us and trying to be a voice that uplifted Native people, it's just like, gosh, man. I would have much rather see Jeff Barnaby in that place. Because she wins, when you're an up-and-coming film director and filmmaker, you have to do a lot of unpaid work. You're doing a lot of stuff. You're living off of like bologna sandwiches and crackers because you have to apply for grant funding. You do a lot of unpaid internships. And so these grant funds that are created for indigenous actors, directors to be fellows at these institutes, she got a lot of these awards for these grant money, grant funding. There's usually only one award they're giving out to one indigenous person, and she got a lot of it. And there's a lot of hate, rightfully so, in the acting film, like in the Native film community for this crap. And it's hard because there is such a disparity in experience that we can't even get aligned around what the next step should be. There are some people that will come at me and be mad about what I'm saying because, Ian, we shouldn't be gatekeepers for who is indigenous. We shouldn't be the people telling other people, hey, you're not native enough. What I just talked about, me as a kid with those sports experiences, I agree. It's gross. It hurts to be told by other native people, to have a native mom have that anger directed at you, like, hey, he's not native. He doesn't look Navajo. Let me see his birth certificate. He looks too old. There's no way he's Navajo. And you have to sit there and between you and another parent and like wonder, like, oh God, what's happening? What's happening? So when we have this situation, it's just like, gosh, you go through this whirlwind. And my thoughts on this issue are going to continue to evolve. And maybe in a year, I'll look back on this and be like, Ian, why did you release that episode? There was no need to do that. But the trickster, it's a shame. If nothing else, I'll kind of get off my own personal feelings about this, but it sucks that we can't even have a constant message about what to do, how to respond, because there's such a disparity. There are some people that believe that we should just let her go and just say, hey, let her, she eventually stepped down from the show and said that she's going to hire a genealogist and going to be looking into her lineage. First of all, if you're a native, you don't need to hire a genealogist. And she went and sued she gave a notice of libel to the CBC, basically for defamation of character, because they didn't do their research before they let her go. Native people don't sue. We don't sue. Anyway, that's that was kind of an ignorant thing to say, but yeah, we don't. Oh, gosh, I don't know, man. Whatever. So let's move on. Let's talk about Yellowstone, 1883. So Taylor Sheridan is the creator of Yellowstone, also the creator of Hell or High Water, Sicario, and Wind River. So he is pivotal in Yellowstone. There's native representation in Yellowstone. I have my opinion about it because of Kelsey Aspel, Kelsey Chow, who was in Wind River, who's now in Yellowstone playing a native character, claims native heritage. Another one of these issues that can be lumped into the Michelle Latimer case, but I'm not going to talk about that. I just feel like the representation, when you go back to 1883, Yellowstone is going to have a spin-off show called Yellowstone 1883, where it's going to follow the basically start of the Dutton family as they went westward to where they end up founding where the show is right now. And I feel like the further you go back in history, the more opportunity there is to screw up representation, because it requires more research, more work, and more respect and more reverence to not abide by what's in history books. To look at what you read in a history book, to see what you see in a museum, and you have to question, is that accurate? Is that really what it is? Because chances are Native people didn't put that there. Native people weren't involved with that story, with that display, but that's what they're going to use. And when they go back and talk about this show, I guarantee you they're going to say, we got with the world's renown, we got with the best culture museum curators, we got with the best historians, we got with the best this, we had a Native American consultant, and that poor Native American consultant has to be taken to task when something doesn't go right. They're going to be the one that's called to the carpet, like, hey, that person vetted it. I mean, if there was problems with this movie, with this TV show, rather, then, they should have said something. They didn't say anything. It's unfair. But anyway, let's talk about Star Wars, Finding Nemo. I really went to a dark place there. For those of you that are listening for the first time to my show, I normally don't get like that. I apologize. It's just, gosh, there was just a touchy issue for me, and I just had to get it all out there. I apologize. I hope you keep listening to my show. Finding Nemo, Star Wars got added to Disney Plus, and couldn't be more excited. The Navajo dubbed versions. So if you're not Navajo and you're just like, God, Navajos again, are you serious? Everything's got to be Navajos. Navajo tacos, Navajo this, Navajo that. I hear ya. I get sick of it too. I'm Navajo, born and raised from the res. I feel it. I feel it. Don't worry. I'm going to talk about this in a more beneficial way of how it will benefit Indian country moving forward. Language revitalization efforts moving forward. But there, a little bit of a backstory. The Navajo dub versions, this isn't news to Navajo people. This isn't news. Navajo dubbed version of Star Wars came out in 2013. Navajo dubbed version of Finding Nemo came out in 2016. and they were only available in hard copy form. So really, it was just like bootleg selling out of the back of a truck, like kind of situation, where you'd have to go to a Navajo Nation museum, you had to order it online, and you'd have to get a hard copy physical DVD. So the fact that it's added to Disney Plus backed it enough that they're like, hey, we're going to add it to our platform, increases accessibility, and that's the best part about it. And it sets a precedent that you can do this for other indigenous languages. It sets a precedent that, hey, something like Disney Plus can support this to the degree that they're going to put it on their platform. So let's do this for Lakota. Let's do this for Karis. Let's do this for Blackfoot. Whatever. Let's not even dub a movie. Let's create our own TV show. Look at Molly from Denali. It just shows what's possible. It takes what's possible to the next level. Because the floor has been raised, in my opinion. Yeah, this is Navajo news, but really this should be celebrated across Indian country, because you can look at this now and say like, hey, what else can we do now? Look at what happened. What else can we do with this? And this is going to pave the way too for other Native actors. I interviewed Natalie Benali, who was the voice of Dory in the Navajo dub version of Finding Nemo. She is a Navajo actor who also is a voice actor. If we decide to do this for other native languages, Karis, Lakota, you're going to get native speakers to voice those roles. And I guarantee you there are actors that currently are native language speakers who happen to speak their native language that can get work and do this. This is how you get yourself out there. This is how we take the next step to like take control of our own destiny and say like, hey, I know a native actor who really struggles to get work, but I am now going to be doing a Lakota version of Devil Wears Prada or a Navajo version of Devil Wears Prada. We're going to dub it in Navajo or whatever indigenous language you want. And we're going to have people... I just said Devil Wears Prada. If you don't like Devil Wears Prada, I apologize. for the Avengers, or we're going to do Gone with the Wind, or we're going to do Titanic, whatever. We are going to dub this movie, and we're going to have authentic language spoken by people who are from the community who speak the language. You can't fake that. I think that's the best news about this. Is right now we have these issues of like verification and pretendians. If you do stuff like Navajo dubbed anything or native language dubbed anything, you can't fake that. You can't fake speaking the language. Because we're going to vet that. We're going to make sure that it's authentic. And people that are producing the movie are going to make sure it's authentic because they don't want to have that come back at them. And Finding Nemo, even if you're not Navajo, just take a glance at it. Go to extras in when you get to Finding Nemo Star Wars, go to extras, scroll all the way down, and it'll say Navajo dubbed version. Just see what it looks like. Put English subtitles on. Just watch it for a second. Like, these actors are magnificent. And these are native people. These are native people speaking those lines. And it's awesome. Navajo people speaking these lines. It's freaking awesome. I think it just shows what's possible. I digress. I'll finish up with the last, couple of things. A lot of people have been asking me about my podcast and about what it takes to start a podcast. Best thing I'll tell you, if you're curious, hit me up. If you want advice, hit me up. I'm only 22 episodes in. This is episode 22. So if you have questions at all that I can answer, let me know. I will steer you as best as possible toward what we can do. I'll do an Instagram live if we have to. When Clubhouse gets further off the ground, I'll start a room and maybe invite some people who are more professional than I am, who actually are in the business, and we can talk about that. I 100% want more native voices out there in podcast land and YouTube land talking about representation, but just in general, talking about what they're passionate about, because no matter what anyone thinks, by virtue of you being Native American and having that experience, you are unique. Just because you look around you and think like, oh, nobody wants to hear my perspective. Guess what? I thought that. I 100% thought that. 100%. I thought like nobody's going to want to hear a Navajo res kid talk about native representation in film. This is just a passion for mine, and I molded over, and thankfully I had a friend, non-native friend, who was just like in the podcast. He's like, just do it, man. Just do it. You won't regret it. If you love it, you'll love doing it. And I love it. And it's great. And I hear people connect with me all the time and they say, I'm so happy that this show exists. I'm so happy that this exists. I binged your show. I can't wait for the next episode to come out. And I'm just like, holy crap, this is nuts. And this is just a passion project for me. I mean, seemingly it's just a passion project, but it's something I do for a hobby and I love it. And I hope that if you're passionate about doing something like that, launching a show, launching a YouTube channel, me and my wife, we both have YouTube channels and podcasts. So do it. Reach out. We'll help. Which leads me to my YouTube channel. I currently publish all my episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. On YouTube, obviously, it's just a still image with the audio posted every single time an episode gets pushed out. That's just through my RSS feed, and that manually happens. And then we'll go back and edit the video to edit the still image to include like images from if it's a movie or an interview. We'll include the picture, maybe like the movie poster, and a couple of characters that we discuss. That's all we do. But I want to do YouTube videos moving forward. I was talking with my wife, and I was just like, there's such a void. I wish one day I wanted to see like top 5 Wes Studi movies. No one has that. Top 5 Irene Bedard movies, Graham Greene movies, best native movies on Netflix right now. They don't have any of that. And that's what I plan to do. While my podcasts here are more long form, take up to an hour. I think these YouTube videos that I'm planning to push out, they'll probably be closer to like 5-10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes on tops. But they'll just be more abrupt reviews. Not even reviews of movies. It's just like quick recaps of like, here's the top 5 Wes Studi movies. And then number 5, blah, blah, blah. Number 4, number 3. And just kind of be silly, give me an opportunity to just show some range of like my personality. But I think also I'm just a goofy person by nature. So I think I gravitate more toward wanting to do more YouTube videos. And the podcast isn't going away. For those of you that are like, man, that sucks. I kind of like the podcast better than some stupid YouTube video. This will be in conjunction with what I'm doing with YouTube. I've got in touch with a few people who've been gracious enough to offer me some mentorship. And they said that you should film your podcast. Continue to push out the audio on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, but film your podcast and post that on YouTube. Because people love that visual aspect of podcasts, even if it's just to see you talk, so they can see how you look, see your reaction. I'll have to start dressing up a little bit because I just wear like tank tops and stuff when I record. But yeah, I mean, just to add a different element to it, to really expand the reach of this show. I truly believe there are people that will listen to this and either like love this show because of what it talks about and finally feel seen of like, damn, it's about time somebody's talking about this. Or even better, to have someone say, he doesn't quite represent the voice that I want to see, so I want to go start my own show and start my own podcast about whatever. That would be great. That'd be freaking great. So I hope you do that. Yeah, this is great. So let's go ahead and start wrapping this up. I think that in summary, this has just been 2020 has been a hell of a year. I'm not one of those people that thinks like, new year, new me. It's just another month. Just because the last number on the year changes doesn't mean everything changes. We're still in the midst of COVID-19. We still have a lot of things that are affecting our communities. But I will say this show gives me hope and motivation that people are passionate about representation. The Super Bowl just happened yesterday, and it was the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And there were a lot of people on social media talking about representation. When I first started talking about native mascots, it was in 2010 and 11 when I had my first podcast that fizzled out and flamed out. People were resistant to the idea more so than they are now. Now it's more accepted to look at native representation in the form of mascots and talk about why it's problematic and not just point out, hey, that's a problem. And I love that. It takes time. This stuff takes time. Native representation in film and television, it's going to take time for us to talk about these have these conversations. And I'm not one to condemn movies and say, that movie should be canceled, that television show should be canceled. I'm about educating and let you as the viewer to try to decide for yourself. Based on my perception of being a reservation Navajo kid, just one person's opinion, you can make your own opinion after that. You know, if that influences your opinion, great. If you already have your mind made up, great. I'm not here to sway anybody one way or another. I'm just simply offering a perspective that may be different from something you may encounter. Native or not native. And I'm going to reset the room real quick. You don't have to be native to listen to this show. I've had some people, reach out to me and say, like, I don't want to be infiltrating native spaces by listening to your show. You don't have to be native. You don't have to be. I'm just giving you perspective of what I feel, what I think. By all means, give me feedback. This is for everybody. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Leave me feedback. Shoot me a DM. Shoot me an email. What do you like? What do you don't like? What do you want to see more of? What do you currently like? I just want to make this show better, as good as possible on the podcast and in the future videos on YouTube. So that's all I have for today. Talk to you later.